Hello and welcome to another video on the React Native intro. And the whole point of today's video is to make a quick recap from this course taught by Kadi Kraman. Uh, she holds a mathematical background and now moved to the software development. She works at Formidable, a social first creative agency, as Director of Engineering Mobile Services, and then right now as a software developer at Expert. So the idea here is that by understanding is who is this course for, what is the goal of this, and a little bit of the introductions. How do you get started building a React Native application? Develop a sense of how these things work, how all of these little units combine together, and finally is being able to create a single application that works on the 99% of mobile iOS market share, which is Android and iOS. So the goal of this is for us, well, learn to understand and build, so learn to build React Native application, it is mental models, by understanding the mental models, technique and strategy for React Native and React on the web. So understand those difference. And this course is for JavaScript developers that are new to React Native. And here we look at the introduction, where, well, this is something that you require. You require is the setup requirements. You need a PC or a Mac or a Linux, and also a mobile device, Android or iOS. So React Native show us that how powerful is this particular device or mobile that now are capable to have over 100,000 times more processing power and 1 million times more RAM, at least at 2020, than the leading computer or the guidance computer at Apollo in that landed the first human on the moon. So over these past 50 years, look at what we have done. And that actually seems crazy. So this small interface with this small screen makes the web browsing suboptimal. Unlike comparing with performance, or unlike comparing with desktop and laptop performance. So because we want is to build application for each one of those mobile OS, thanks to the GS stat count, where they show you is the mobile OS overview. This is a website that helps small business owners to make better decisions, and also whoever now that is on that having online business now have data to support their findings and the arguments. So roughly here, the Android market share is about 70.79%, whereas iOS has 28.46%. This makes roughly like 99.99% of the mobile OS market share. So because of that, and unlike applications that you run or build on iOS or in Mac, doesn't work on Windows, pretty much the same on the mobile iOS. So if you build an application on Android, it doesn't work on iOS and vice versa. So the set of instruction and the OS has different, so it exposes different features. And the way of how you can talk to those language require you to know and to talk in their own language. For example, if you're building out Android applications, you do that using Java or Kotlin. If you are, for example, building is iOS app, you need to write on Object-C or Swift. So because of this, now we look at how we need to have is two different workflows with two different code sets, two different dev teams, and this is something that is tedious. It is hard to keep tracking all of these features, and because companies have this sort of problems, one of them, Facebook, decided to have it a go at solving it. And that's where React Native comes. So with this huge overview, when someone actually tells you what is React Native, well, React Native is something or this framework that allows you to build applications, mobile applications on Android and iOS. So the the key goal here, or the key benefits of using React Native, is that you're gonna have allegedly one code base, one language, uh, in one workflow that you can extend the functionality of your applications. So that in theory is something good because quite frankly, this benefit is that not only is backed by Facebook, uh, aka Meta, but the applications that you build here are indistinguishable from real native applications. So since we're compiling to native code, so React Native behind the scenes, that's what it's doing. It's compiling to native code. It's fully extensible and it is open source. So unlike other solutions out there like Ionic or other solutions, React Native, they come with this tool set, and if you want to do something outside of that, you are on your own. So here with React Native, you'll always have the ability to go into the native code. Perhaps now they allow you these frameworks to go into that, but React Native now is something that you can reuse your knowledge, whether it's on the front, the web, as well as the mobile OS. So how does it work? It works by React is built by targeting existing compilers. So if you build an application on Android, it actually targets the Android compiler to output is an Android artifact or an Android application. Pretty much with iOS, it targets the iOS iOS compiler to produce this artifact on iOS. Windows virtual reality or React VR. So the way of how that works, about how they actually is doing, is quite. I don't know what it is, by the way, because presumably this each one of those compilers need an input for that. It need the Android or Kotlin or Java, and for iOS in it is Object-C or Swift. So perhaps React Native is targeting each one of those. So they need to have an interface to talk to. Uh, Presumably React Native is generating output for that, or is generating um, React Native any of this language that this compiler needs to. Okay, perhaps using the adapter pattern, je ne sais pas, but this is the architecture of React Native. So there's a couple of questions that was asked from the audience to Kadi. First, which applications have you the most trouble when building it? Okay, uh, well, linking Android to a particular email provider, and what you need to create is your own payment provider solution, aka particularly payment provider is not supported on React Native. That's where you need to go to, not only Object-C but also to uh, Java or Kotlin. And this is quite straightforward. Well, a little, it's quite a little straightforward, that you need to enhance your React app to native code. So if you find yourself interacting with native particular code that React doesn't support, there are good guides on how to do that. Now with the advancement of technology and that we have is AI and that kind of thing, that'll be way, way, way much better. Good. This is question one. And the question two is that there are many, which models, since there are a lot of models, which one of them should we stay away for uh, to write in React applications? Well, since Facebook is building a JavaScript engine specifically for React Native called Hermes, in theory there should be no performance penalty. So this is based on her experience in 2020. That's good. And now next is a little bit of tools that are around of the React Native ecosystem that help to improve your developer experience. So for example is Expo. If you have never heard about that, no problem, because this is just a suite of tools built for and around React Native. So it is designed to make the building to make your building experience as easily as possible. It is all focused on developer experience. It is a separate entity, company, and it's not affiliated with Facebook, something to remember. And some people have strong opinions about this Expo because you shouldn't write applications in Expo and that kind of thing. But the idea with Expo is that for any workshop, or if you're new to React Native and you want to give it a go to this without worrying about the setup, which is something that is highly, highly appreciated, you can go with the uh, with Expo, right? She also mentioned that if you don't go with Expo, it will take a little bit of time to actually set up your environment. It can take you, for example, up to 2 hours in Windows to set up everything. Okay. In the case of iOS, it can take you perhaps 1 hour and a half. Again, this is roughly estimations, but the idea here is that Expo will help you to reduce the setup time, which is something that it did. And then you got this Expo limitation. So if you find yourself building a feature that is outside of the React Native or Expo, you will do something called ejecting. I don't know if this actually that is doing, but this is when it comes tricky. Okay. Because some based on her experience, Kadi mentioned that any production grade applications she wrote ends up getting out from Expo, and it is all based on their client's needs. And especially if you're building for iOS, that's most of the time what they end up doing. So the idea here is that by building these particular applications, the development of mobile application is quite straightforward. So the entire pipeline of that is quite straightforward, and that's also with the help of the EAS, the Expo Application Servers, where they provide you the development process, the mental models, and the development feedback loop. I mean, uh, also with other models like routers. You can also extend your functionality with using by using expo models, and how you can now deploy your applications on the cloud, and then creating this entire supply chain from developing, building, deploying, publishing, and monitoring your app. That's something very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So, we get started with React Native first, and that is anytime you want to build or develop a React Native application, you must be on the same network, because this is what is going to send. There is a React Native model bundler called Metro, but again, because your JavaScript bundle is built and sent over your local Wi-Fi as a way to speed up the development process. And for that, Expo Go is this application that allows you to make it easy for you to test that. So that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. We add a linter here because it's something that is going to help us with our developer experience a lot. So easily, prettier, and out of fixing. I will go mostly with the recommendation of Brian Holt. Okay. So yeah, this is now a little bit of code that actually show is what are we gonna focus ourselves is in the case of ESLint, this linting tool. Hey, I want you now for this project, get me all the recommended uh, React Native linting guidelines. And this tells which config pack to use as a way to provide more uh, code formatting. And then you got debugging, something that is very, very, very important, because Reload and OpenJS Debugger are the two main things that you're going to do as you develop your Expo application or React Native. And then finally, we get into what are the basic components. Okay, so because in React Native, because in React Native you use is JavaScript to access to the platform APIs. When it comes to describing the appearance and behaviors, um, we use React. Very, very important distinction here. And if you're familiar with React, okay, that'll be a piece of cake. So in React Native, this is most likely to understand this. So in React Native, we use JavaScript to access to the platform APIs. Okay, and when it comes to describing the appearance and the behaviors, we use React. So as you can see, unlike React on the web, we have this global tags like div, ul, ol, anchor. Now here, everything needs to be imported in the React Native. And I think this is much more self-descripted. It can be quite tedious for some developers, but I think that the more descriptive you are, the more you're, as an author, uh, show the intent of your code and be clear with that, the better off for you and others to read that and improve it. Why is that? Because the vast majority of the time we're going to is read our code as a software developer and remove code base most of the time. So here we look at some UI React Native components, basic components like the view, which this is pretty much like the div on the web. We also have a scroll view, which allows you to make your content scrollable. Text, okay, if you want to put any text in there, you must use this tag, otherwise it will throw you an error. uh, and then the styling. And in the styling, this is something quite interesting because now, unlike uh, styles on the web, we can get rid of this global CSS and that kind of thing. So they don't have any effect here because styling is done by doing or in React Native, styling is done exactly. No R exactly. In React Native, styling is done by inline styles, which can forget about CSS cascading and all of that kind of thing. But that it is. So yeah, in React Native, all styling is done by inline styles. So alright, that's great. So Kadi creates the style at the bottom of the file. Exactly, creates it. She creates the style at the bottom of the file. Pretty much like when if you have experience building view applications, that actually is quite similar to this. This is how they do it. And because we need to actually use is a particular object to create our styles for catching and performance uh, matters, we need to define that, and there is when we're going to say, hey, this object is it receives an object. So this object is where we're going to define all of these styles for us. And when we define our styles, okay, which is something that I would like to at least add some okay. So when you define this, all right, like so, let me actually define something like this. So when we're doing this, again, all stylings here are done. And all styles here are done. Uh, styles are done. So, yeah, styles are done by. It's like stylings are done. Styling is done. Okay, styling is done by doing inline styling. So, for example, like this. As you can see here, you don't need to specify the unit because since this is only one for mobile devices, the unique unit is something is density independent pixel. So you don't need to specify is the unit for that. There's some convenient things or convenient because most of the time when you are developing applications, you are going to constantly is working with padding and margin. We use this safe area view as a way to indicate, hey, this content where we're going to show, I want you to now display it where it needs to. In the case of Android, it actually do that, depend of the Android, but in the case of the iOS, you need to specify that because otherwise it will put it that at the top right, at the top left corner of your mobile. This is because this is a 00 coordinate in the mobile. All right, that's good. That's great. And then we talk about is positioning. Very, very, very important topic that you're gonna do a lot. And that is here we use something called flexible. If you don't know about flexible, This is a great time for you to learn about it. You can also go with something called Flexbox or Flexbox Froggy as a way to make yourself familiar with that. It's like, hey, this is interesting, this is cool. How can I start to play with that? Try to align them in another a very interesting thing that I want to bring my attention. All right. Yeah, a very interesting thing is that flex one is indicating that give me the height of my parent. You can take a look at also at the MDN docs. So a word on style sheet object. As I mentioned before, React Native community advise you to use the objects for performance and catching reasons. You can also pass is an array of styles, uh, and you should avoid to give is your own style as an object to these styles. Remember, use the styles for that. And then we talk about a little bit of fonts. So if you want to use multiple fonts in your application, let's say you have a big application, the idea here is that you can have is just one common shared file that you can reuse across different components. This one shared folder, let's say that contains the font or the styles, you can share across different folders. And the other is you create is components that you can reuse in every single place. So one particular approach is by building is the exactly. So one particular approach is by building is the style object, okay, or building is the user input, and then you share across whatever you need there. What will be a good example? I will go with the UI. Unlike the style. Why? Because if we follow is the well tested proven approach of the atomic design, so your design is this little piece of this atom of UI, and then you compose it. Uh, or you can also have a catalog of that. But in any case, yes, we also look at a couple a solution exercise, for example, exercise here of how you can create that, which quite frankly was not that hard. Okay, it was pretty much like writing your, how do you put it? Yeah, pretty much like writing your, which is this, pretty much like writing your application here with these little boxes. Something quite trivial, but also quite something that you're gonna do a lot. Okay, something that you're gonna do a lot. Uh, and yeah, so as to move on here, this is the exercise. It's a way to write it down. And then finally, because I'm gonna take some notes out of the course, you're not gonna see what I'm doing, but that's the idea behind today's video. So what I'm gonna do here, oh really?
As developers, we do a lot of debugging.
So what we're gonna do here is now components. Now let me take a look at this. So React, or in this case, is components. So, components. So React Native, um, unlike or React Native. Exactly, React Native, the same as React, is a component-based framework. Exactly. So this means that your app is building like this little Lego blocks. And it's funny because we most of the time we make we make a Lego block reference, which is a human made solution. And um, in the case of nature, and how can we actually make this? If we take a look at how nature do the thing that it does, it's quite parsimonious. And yeah, it's totally quite parsimonious. And it's totally quite parsimonious when it comes to build and add all of this. For example, the formation of stars or the planets is that this gravitatory pull actually over the years and decades, centuries, is going to build each one is going to group all of this different dust around it, and then he's going to build is that. So I prefer to use this kind of analogy. Again, is Lego block is great, but when it comes to actually use real world analogies, uh, how the universe or how planets are created is just a way of how you can see that hey, all of these things are progressive. So all of these things are going to stack each other, going to group them together, and they're going to start from this space dust, and then he built all of this. So yeah, so React Native, the same as React, is a component-based framework. That means that your app basically is building like a Lego blocks. Mm, lots and lots. Okay, so we have we have a root component, uh, and then inside of them a lot of lot, a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot of lot. Okay, yeah, we have a root component, uh, which is the entry point, the entry point for your app, and then inside of them and then inside of them a lot of a lot a lot a lot components.
So little components that are inside each other and next to each other, and we want to
Exactly. That are inside of others or next each other.
reuse them as much as possible. Yeah, it's generally a good practice to break your app into as like many small components, and it has a couple of benefits. It promotes component reuse. Like you've already built a button, you make sure that it interacts correctly, it has the right colors. Why would you want to build it twice? And it's easier to follow. No one wants to debug a 1,000 line React component if they can help it. And finally, it's easier to test. It's significantly easier to unit test a small component than it is a huge one. Now let's look at the app that we've built so far. Can you see something that can be extracted into a component? Well, I think the colored boxes is a pretty good candidate for being refactored. So let's see that. In general, in general, in React, we have a components directory where we add our components. So let's go to the root directory of your project and let's create a new folder. Create folders here. Yeah, called components. And now inside this component, let's create a new file called colorbox.js. Now this is going to be our reusable colorbox component.
Mm-hmm.
I always start all new components with my default hello world, display something in the screen to make sure it's working code. So let's do that here as well. So let's import React.
Okay. This technique is something important. Technique. Technique one. Every time you build a component, make it. Anytime you build a component, make it sim. Anytime you build a component, um, anytime you build a component, make it simple to test for the first time with some content to show if it's UI. Yeah.
Let's import the view and text from React Native. Now let's create a constant component called
Mm-hmm.
colorbox.
Which is a function that you want to return like that. So we're using this arrow function as a way to say, hey, the value of this, uh, I don't want you to have any value of this. I want you to create is a new this value. So don't hold any reference of this.
Same as what we did before, we just have a view with some text inside.
Mm-hmm. So what are the difference here? Exactly. The value of this, it is lexically bound. It means that it is value. Their value depends on when it was written. The argument objects, traditional functions have arguments object, which is array-like object that contains all the argument paths. Arrow functions do not have arguments object, but you can achieve the same but you can achieve the same behavior by using rest parameter, and as well as the constructor. Traditional function, when not in strict mode, can be used as constructor called with the new keyword to create new objects. Arrow function cannot be used as a constructor and will throw an error with new. The other is methods overriding. Arrow functions are anonymous and hence they cannot be overriding as compared to traditional functions. So this is the main difference of this arrow function. So first is their syntax. Second is this value. Uh, Second is the this value. So exactly is undefined. So the value of this is lexical, not on the execution context. Okay. Yeah, unlike the arrow function and newer functions, the value of this is lexical. It means that uh, it will be enclosing on the lexical scope where it was written. Whereas without the arrow function, now the value of this is based on is determining how the function is called. It is execution context. It doesn't have any argument objects. Okay. Right now you're not able to see what I'm doing. Make sure to do this. Okay, it's not part of the argument objects here, but you can so it doesn't have argument, but you can achieve the same functionality by using the rest parameter. Exactly. And the other is a constructor. Arrow functions don't have a cannot be used as a constructor. They will throw an error. Exactly. And method overriding. Arrow functions are anonymous and hence they cannot be overrated as compared to traditional functions. So what Kadi is doing here is say, hey, we can now reuse, since React is a component-based framework, the same as React Native, which means that we can create our or app like Lego block, and since the entry point of our application is the app.js, by building these reusable components inside of it as our components, okay, yeah, components, I think it's in plural. Yeah. Here, where we can see is that this view, this box, is a little good candidate to build our first component, which will be called, I think she called it color box. Exactly. Color box. Nope. Okay. So color box.js. And anytime you start to create a new component, a good practice is, hey, create a basic component that allow you to now look at them at your application, so display some content in your application. So first thing first, is important to do is the import from React. Okay, this is React. All right, and then you say, hey, let's go to import is now from React Native this particular components, which is the view, pretty much like a div on the web, as well as the text. And now we can start to say, hey, I want you to now is create the color box. Even here is now helping So even this JavaScript or GitHub compiler is saying, hey, do you mean this? Color box and color name, Xcode. Uh, I mean color box. I mean color box as well as the equal, uh, but with but without the color X in all of this. And this is something interesting. So because right now we don't care about which kind of property we are receiving, and the subtle difference between this uh, arrow function is that it doesn't have a this arrow function doesn't have access. This arrow function, the value of this is lexical scope, which means that it's not based on how the function is called. It is when is the value of this will refers to where it was written, when it was written, and pretty much this is exactly what we want to create, right? So hey, I want you to return now here a view. It is interesting because we're using is uh, for the parenthesis as a way to say this. So hey, now this is the color box, and after that we need to export as a default model the color box. Right, there you got it. Okay, and when it comes now to import that, I will say, hey, you can import that with that. So here, because we're importing is the style box, which is giving us part of the alignment, uh, as well as the particular color, we can use now receive those parameters from that. So we're gonna see how she is doing that.
And finally, don't forget to return the color box component as the default export. You can have multiple components per file, but generally a good practice is just to stick to one component per file, because then you don't lose them. You'll just see what their components are based on the file names. Now that we have this component, let's import it to our app and display it on the screen. So let's import colorbox
Mm-hmm.
from components color box. And let's add it at the like after the last box that we already have.
That's a way to show you. Mm-hmm.
You should be seeing the text that you added on the screen underneath all your other boxes. Now, if you've not done React before, one thing to note here is I've used what's called a self-closing JSX element.
Mm-hmm.
So normally JSX elements have a starting tag and an ending tag. So the ending tag has what's it called, a little dash to say that it ended, and then what are called children inside. Whereas this color box, we don't want to pass any children into it, so we just want the component itself. So rather than having us do this color box
Self-closing
file
tags.
one,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to create import starseed, create, and a box file,
Exactly.
style.
Mm-hmm. Our style must be defined per component here.
I'm just going to copy these styles over. So box style.
Exactly. Our component must have is
Um, cool. Well, this is working. But now what we've done is we've just taken our cyan box and created a color box for it, which is not very handy. What we'd like is for this box to display the color and the name of the color dynamically. Now, what we can use for this are props or properties. You've already actually used properties, specifically the style property. What you might not know is that you can add your own properties, as many as you want. So for the color box, we have two properties we'd like to add. We have the color name, which in this case is cyan, and color and text. Now, in order to get access to these two properties in the color box,
We
we
get
get
that
passed into
into
here.
the
So
function
if you
arguments
assign this to
here.
props, you can replace cyan with props.colorName, and you can replace this hex code with props. I think I should call it hex code. I think I called it hex code in my solution, so I'm going to rename it to hex code. Now, notice that if we want to use any kind of variables as text, we have to wrap them into curly braces because that tells React Native that this is text. Because if I didn't do this, it would just render props.colorName as a text, which is not what we want. And then finally, this is a convention in React, and I think I'm going to follow it throughout this course, that we destructure the properties. So rather than having a props here and doing props.colorName, we can actually replace this with curly braces and destructure the properties directly. So we can do a color name and hex code, and then just get rid of this.
So as she mentioned right now is that this is our text color here, really straightforward, handy, and because we want to actually reuse some of this color, let's say for example the cyan, right? We can is do something like this. Hey, I want you to now this component show me this, all right? Uh, and because of that, we need to create our style component, which is, hey, let me create now this style component completely, but from using the style sheet object, okay? In our case, because what we want is the box only styles and box text, because she defined is the style and the box text. Exactly, she defined the box, the text, I mean the box, not the font here. What you define is the box here. What you have is the padding 10, justify content center and align certain. Justify content is for putting the or is to center content vertically and align is horizontally. Okay, so here we want is to put at center and add some margin to that. So this is the box. So far so good. All right, and the other is the box text, right? So this will be called is box text for that. Okay, color and font weight. So this is what we call is box text for that, as well as style.bot and style.cn as color.
But now what we've done is we're just taking our cyan with.
So if we want to make that this dynamic, we can make use of the props, okay, or the React convention of the structuring syntax. And hey, this is the property that I'm receiving. Let's make use of this. The name of that will be called color name for our case, this property, as well as the Xcode here. So just to remember that any time that the React say, hey, how can I access to this particular data, is by using the curly brackets, and similar to this, and you say, hey, how can I access to this data, is through this. So color name and Xcode for that. So that's great. That's totally great. And here, da, 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 as you save this and then you now import that component. Luckily for us, one way to import that is by saying is by calling as a color box, view out the ID actually out import that component for us, and we can actually pass is the props from that. That's actually pretty interesting, and it is very helpful to autocomplete our code. So that's something powerful. That's something powerful. Oh my god, it is, bro. It actually shrink the amount of time that I need to do this. npm run def. And here I want to say npm run star. Okay. This is gonna call this the Metro bundler. As you can see, the Metro bundler is uh, is pretty much like Webpack but for React Native application. Okay, then you got is this. I need to add this particular property here to say, hey, React Native packager hostname. I need you to point to your local IP LAN. Why? Because the React development is being over the Wi-Fi, and that's lovely. So with Expo Go, now we can make our life much more simpler. We can just clear that. We can scan the code. We can make our life much more simpler when it comes to developer application, which is right now is bundling. Okay, and I think that you should be able to see. Okay, it's 96%. Okay, soon you should be able to see that exactly. Oh, it throw an error. Welcome to the development of this. And it tells me, hey, the proper style doesn't exist. Oh, because it adds some, okay, some font weight here. Where is this in the entry point? In the body text. In the body text. Here, the color. In the box text of the color box, exactly. He adds some property here called font weight.
Right, the properties. That's it. This is our reusable color box component. So enter a constant tag. You can actually enter here. Cool.
Font weight property style sheet does not exist. Oh, because property style sheet does not exist because okay, it actually doesn't out import that style. Okay, what about now? Now it's supposed to show them properly. All right, that's lovely. That's powerful. I didn't have to install anything like the Android or the JavaScript and that kind of thing. It's like no, I didn't have to do that, which is very powerful. Yep, it is, bro.
Well, this is working, but enter here. So if you hex code, Remember, we can pass in inline styles and we can pass in multiple styles, and we can do it all at once. So we can add a constant here called box color. And do background color text code, and just pass this in as a second argument. Now we can get rid of the actual color style as well. That's it. This is our reusable color box component. Now we can get rid of the actual color style as well.
So yeah, she made something interesting here by adding is say, hey, you know what? I'm going to add this CSS style here, like box color here. This CSS style here. What you have is the background color Xcode. That's right. Holy, you scare me. Based on your recommendation, and what I'm gonna do instead of actually using the cyan object from style, okay, I'm just gonna use is whatever is on the box color for that, and pretty much that's it, right? As you can see, it's actually reusing that. Oh my god, okay, that was quite interesting.
That's it. This is our reusable color box component. So now all we want to do is replace all of the rest of the colors with it. So let's create 4 of these and then just copy this. We've got blue, magenta, orange. I'm going to copy the hex code as well.
So what we're gonna do here is to just now, instead of having to write that view over and over and over, we can say, hey, the color here is blue, and this is their Xcode, uh, similar to magenta, and their Xcode. Interesting. And the same for orange, and for that. So you can see from a component that has over 60 fine line of code, 64, you know, from a component that has 64 line of code like this, so from a component of 64 line of code, and that is including here, because it's also take a look at the outcome here. Exactly, from a component of 64 line of code, okay, exactly, without component, okay, from a component of 60 line of code, we end up having a component base, or a component with, yeah, a lot of less, a lot of less, a lot of less. Here we can remove also the color here. There's a way to say the background color, and that's all. So we end up with a component with 45 line of code. We end up with a component with 45 line of code. Component base. that kind of thing. So it's pretty much a reduction. If you take a look now at the calculator here, and then you say 65 minus 45 is 20 line, 65, 20 is 20 divide 65. God damn. How many pieces 20 fit into 65? And it's actually 30% less code. Okay. Um, Over 30% less code. Quite considerable.
And we can also get rid of the styles here. So the box, text box style, and all the text styles. So you should only have the container and the text styles.
Oh,
Now we basically
exactly.
converted our component into, like, we refactored our code so that our,
No, it's even further, bro. It's even further. 60 line of code minus 38 to 38, bro. 38. 65 line of code from 38. Exactly. So from 60 line of code to 38. That is 65 minus 38. 65 minus 38 is 27. How many 27s fits into 65? And that is 41%. 41% 0.53 41.53% less line of code in our entry point, in our main component. Exactly. Which is improved readability. Which improves readability. However, we add a lot of line of code. We add couple line of code in other component, but it's not representative. You know. So with that,
all
um,
of those components are separate, making our code much cleaner and easier to read.
totally, totally. So with that, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.